Thank you. Thank you for spending part of your day together and with me. Um, it's a it's a beautiful day here in South Dakota, and I'm hearing it's pretty nice there in Minnesota too, right? And perhaps where you are. Thank you for taking this time together to explore Sutra so close to my heart. I'd like to open with tea ceremony. If you would get or adapted tea water ceremony. If you get a cup with 3 sips of some fluid in it. And if you can come on video for just a moment, that's great. If you need to go off video at any point, no problem. But I'd like to have these 3 sips as one. We could follow one another. Thank you. So welcome to this fresh talk on the Surangama Sutra. For those of you who heard me speak about this during morning zazen this week, you heard me say this is my favorite sutra, and that I love this sutra, and that I'd tell you why I love this sutra if you came to this talk. So I'm going to open with that. Why do I love this sutra? I think I've always been drawn just in my own temperament to get to the bottom of things. And this sutra completely gets to the bottom of things, the bottomless bottom of things. It shows how we get everything backwards. It shows what's beyond space and time, what's beyond life and death, right here, right now, right in this moment. It shows who we are in our essence and in our phenomena. And it shows how to practice to realize all this. Wow. You know, when I came across this sutra, it was by no means the first one I had read, but I felt suddenly like that time when I was in 3rd grade and I saw the arithmetic book that the teacher was teaching out of, and it had all the answers in it. And I was like, wow, her math book has all the answers. Mine doesn't. You know, I later realized that was called a teacher's guide. but that's how I felt reading the sutra. It was like it had all the answers in it. Now, that said, it's a very repetitive sutra, and there's parts of it that just seem to go over and over and around and around. And that's why we're devoting really a reading group to it. So I can't do justice to it in just, an hour or so talk. We're chewing into this in a reading group that is going a little more slowly through it. But I do want to share what I'll call 5 main parts of the sutra with you. And if you get a taste for it, as I did, the rest is an exercise to the listener. How about that? I'll leave it as an exercise to the listener. So where to start? Let's start, just pick up your cup again, just pick up an object. I just want you to just feel this object for a moment. And just feel, I want you to notice the sensation that can detect this object. Notice its smoothness or the roughness. Just feel around this object and notice how you sense it by being, in a sense, in relationship with it. So what is supporting all this perception? How does this happen? Our normal sense of things is this is an object called a cup, and this is another object. This is the subject. This is an object. We have a sense of separation between the two. And that I have senses that can perceive this object, just like you have senses perceiving what you're holding. That's our conventional way of looking at it. And that's where the sutra starts. with saying that's all backwards. It's all backwards. So what it's really going to go into is tearing, it's wiping out is the phrase it uses, wiping out the processes by which we draw ourselves and the universe into being, which happens through how our senses vibrate with the field. And in ancient Buddhist terminology, the way this was described was how perception interacts with alaya vijnana, or seed consciousness, or storehouse consciousness, or eighth consciousness. Those are all synonyms. So this is about breaking up eighth consciousness, or alaya vijnana. Why would we want to break it up? I loved Scobie Roshi's reference to the breaking up time of year in Alaska that happens around this time, maybe even a couple of weeks ago, where the ice starts to melt and everything that had been so solid and in place starts to and suddenly you see the fluidity of things. You see through things. You fall through things if you are walking on it, right? Suddenly it's not such an impenetrable matrix anymore. And that's what this breaking up enables. You see through things. You see through your own sense of self. You see through your sense of object-subject separation. You see through the universe we're creating by our perceptions moment by moment by moment. You see something different. The movie The Matrix, years ago. How many of you saw The Matrix? Is that a familiar reference for you? Yes, no, maybe not. If you've never seen it, you should see it at some point, because it's really a profound movie, but it's really, in a way, getting at this. It's getting at how we live inside a matrix of alaya vijnana, and we take it as reality, and it's not reality. But of course, it has to have heroes and demons and all that in the movie, so it takes it in different directions. There's no hero or demon in this story, but it's being stuck in alaya vijnana that has us screwed up. It's what causes, it also has, I shouldn't put it in a negative term. It's what makes things come out backwards. So let's get into the sutra. It opens with a kind of koan practice, as it were, between Ananda and Buddha. Ananda's in trouble. He was off being deluded by his senses. He's pulled back in by Manjushri and is all contrite, all contrite. And Buddha is basically saying to him, why did you follow me? Why do you follow your teacher? And he goes like, well, I could see you have, you're the real deal. You have these 32 excellent characteristics. You are the real deal teacher. That's why I followed you. He goes, how do you know that? He goes, well, I see it with my mind. He goes, oh, where's your mind? Well, that's when it starts, right? Because everywhere Ananda thinks his mind is no, 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 no. So this is very familiar to anyone who's done koan trading. No, no, not there, not there, not there, not there. And you might feel into this. I'm not going to go into these answers. We were kind of probing it even this week in reading group, of how again the sutra goes into such detail around why each answer is wrong. And what blows me away is they did this before we knew anything about how human perception worked, in terms of the science of it, but it's so interesting. But after all this, no, 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 no. Basically, Ananda throws his hands up and goes, I'm so confused, please teach me. And here is a very key point of the sutra. It sounds mystical or magical. Beams of light come out of Buddha, rays that, it was the only way in language to try to describe creating a samadhi condition, putting the whole room into samadhi. So what his answer, his real answer is, if you want to you want to see through the matrix, samadhi. That's the answer, samadhi. But of course, it didn't work on Ananda, which is why we get the benefit of the rest of the sermon, right? The rest of the whole story. Because only the bodhisattvas maybe could pick it up. It could pick up the signal. Again, it's always about resonance. And how our antenna vibrates with the field is where our training comes in, right? That's where our practice comes in. So we could say Ananda didn't have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, whatever, couldn't pick up the signal. So lucky for us, Buddha had to use words, but all of the words I want to say are secondary. They're ways of trying to translate an experience, but they're great pointing instructions. So we'll use the words. So he says, you get everything backwards, Ananda, because you're in there's two basic inversions. First, there's the wrong use of the discriminating or clinging mind, the searching mind, the mind that's trying to get to the bottom of things, right? The wrong use of that mind. And that we take it for our own nature. We think that thing that's searching is who we are. And then we get to the second inversion, we get stuck in all the things that thing searches for. In other words, we get stuck in the causal conditions that miss the absolute. And so we wrestle with all the phenomena. We wrestle with all the moving parts that our senses see and perceive, all the ups and downs of everyday life, all the phenomena. So we mistake who we are for that discriminating mind. And then because the mind is, the perception is always discriminating something, we get caught up in all those somethings. Can you see that? Can you feel that? This delusion is only broken by a great samadhi. Samadhi is how you see through this. The discriminating mind can't see through it because it's the thing searching. So it's going to keep shopping. You know, it's going to, but it's not to say it's a bad thing. Discriminating mind can be very useful. In fact, it evolved to keep us alive, as did our senses. Our senses evolved so that, you know, as with all animals and all living beings, so that it could accommodate its environment, figure out how to eat and stay alive. Those aren't bad things. It's just that, in a way, we're so fortunate that evolution has invested so many hundreds of millions of years in getting to a consciousness that can see this. Your consciousness. You can see this. Nematodes can't see this. Even your dog can't see this. Humans can start to see this. Isn't that amazing? So Ananda and Buddha continue to go at it with things about this inversion. And basically, Ananda says, all I got is this discriminating mind. You know, the thing that keeps searching is the thing that found you. So show me pure, true, moveless, pure mind. And again, for the second time, Buddha does not give words. What does he do? Beams of light running out of his forehead again. Second time, he's saying, It's samadhi. But again, Nanda doesn't get it, so we get more words. So he said, and here's becomes a key point in Zen training. This was something that Zen schools picked up on a lot. That one of the ways of starting to see through discriminating mind is by returning all of these moving parts to what they came from. So you sort of keep backing things up, or it's called returning function to substance sometimes in Zen. Returning the functioning of something to the substance of it. So you keep going to where something doesn't have anywhere to go. And when you get to something that has nowhere to go, you're kind of at the fundamental substance. I mean, these are words, and it's easy to misunderstand words because it's not like there's a primal noun, a primal thing out there somewhere. If you could just find that primal source, you know, it's more like you get to the bottomless bottom. And one of the examples of this, or one of the phrases for this, is the difference between a host and a guest. Between a host and a guest. So I'm sitting here with this beautiful backdrop of the Spring Green Dojo behind me is my virtual backdrop. And I'd say to you, you know, what's the difference between, how can you tell the difference between the hosts and guests of Spring Green? How could you tell the difference? We actually had this question when I was talking about this at Winter Sesshin some time ago. And what people correctly observed is that the guests at Spring Green show up in cars, right? And they leave in cars, right? They come and they go. Are you with me? But Pat and Gordon, right? The Greens Roshi, they have nowhere to go. They're there. Well, they have cars, but they're there, right? So the guests are coming and going, and the hosts of Spring Green Dojo stay. Can you feel that? What do you think of any inn or any tap? You know, like the guests come and go. So that same image is given for your mind. The parts that come and go, the moving parts, are the guests. The part that has nowhere to go is the host. So look at the room around you right now. Look at the room around you. Are you surrounded by guests or hosts? What are they? Write it in the chat. You got to write this in the chat. I want to see your answers. Look at the room around you. Are there guests there, or is there a host there? Let's pick up an object. Yellow folder, guest or host? Guest. How can you tell it's a guest? Because in a million years, is that going to be there? Hell no. It's not going to be there in 5 years. Obviously, it's coming and going. Okay. Water bottle, guest or host? How about thought about water bottle? How about a thought about a water bottle? Is that a guest or a host? Right, these are guests, all guests. And in a way, they're all radiant phenomena out of host nature. But the way we see them is in the world of phenomena. It's in the world of space-time. And as soon as something takes form, it's got what do we call a lifetime. Lifetime. Mountain lifetime might be millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, billions of years. Human lifetime, maybe, you know, what, 70, 80, 90, 100? What do we got? Paper cup lifetime? Not very much. So send it back is sending things back to what they came from, to find the unmoving source. So pick up that cup or that object you had before and just play with it. And what I mean by play with it is, in your own mind, send this back to where it came from. So I might send it back in time. Like I might say, well, this is a paper cup, so it came from paper. Okay, but we put together, paper came from trees. Trees came from seeds that came from earlier seeds that came from molecules of that made up the seed, that had little atoms in them, that had little subatomic particles in them, that had wavicles, that had, you get to something you can't even describe. Or you might send it back another way. My perception of the cup, well, my perception of the cup became, I have it, see it with my eyes, and my eyes evolved from light sensing objects that most moving animals have, most, because they have to figure out where to move, and that evolved from more primitive animals, that evolved from one-celled organism, that evolved from cytoplasm, that evolved from amino acids, that evolved from molecules, that evolved from atoms, that evolved from subatomic. Oh, I'm getting to the same place. Oh, you see what happens? You get to something that is sort of like the great, we'd say in physics, the quantum field, out of which all relationships emerge, and everything emerges in relationship, as everything emerges as a resonance. Wow. How about you? If you sent yourself back, who are you? Send yourself back. Oh, I was a little kid, then I came from parents who came, then parents, and go baby through all those human relatives. You get back to the pre-human and before life and rocks, and you're back down into, pretty soon you're back down into subatomic particles, wavicles emerging out of the vast Bodhi ocean. But how do you know that this vast Bodhi ocean is also you? How do you know that this host is also you? Well, that brings us to the next part of the sutra. How we go beyond life and death. There's an old man there, King Prasenajit, who says, I'm an old man. I'm going to be dead soon. And, that troubles me. Because I've heard from some teachers, not you, Buddha, but other teachers, that when the body dies, its annihilation is nirvana. So tell me about this mind that is beyond birth and death. Tell me about this mind. I can't even imagine what's beyond birth and death. And I'm kind of worried about my death. You could feel the sincerity of his question, right? And here's how Buddha takes away his fear. He said, you're an old man, right? He goes, yep. He says, your body's kind of decaying, isn't it? He goes, yep. Your eyesight, your eyes aren't as good as they used to be. That's right. My eyes aren't as good as I used to be able to see really, really well. Now, I'm a little nearsighted. I can't see so well, so yeah, my skin used to be really smooth, but now it's getting kind of wrinkly, and it's getting kind of, yeah, my body's decaying. He goes, I want you to think about a scene that you've seen that you really love. And I invite you to do the same. I want you to think about a place you saw as a child that you could still see now as an adult. Maybe a favorite place. For me, I always think about Lake Superior. That's a place that, I loved so much as a kid. It always called me home. And when I see it now, it still calls me home. Do you have such a place? Do you have a place you can bring to mind that way? That you saw as a child and that you could still see as an adult? Just give me a thumbs up if you've got a place like that you can remember. Okay, because here is the crucial question that he asks King Prasinaget. Because King Prasinaget talks about the Ganges River. He says, yes, I used to see the Ganges River as a child. And he said to the king, well, when you see it now, is your sense of seeing old? Is your sense of seeing wrinkled? And he goes, no, actually, no. My sense, that perception of seeing, yeah, that doesn't get wrinkles. My eyes aren't as good. I could tell that. But the perception of seeing is not aging. Interesting. So there's something beyond space and time in you right now. Your face is wrinkled, but the nature of seeing has no wrinkles. Imagine that. Therefore, that which changes is subject to destruction. So your eyes, the eyeball, the cornea, the retina, the optic, nerve and all that is subject to destruction. But that which does not change, that which is not aging, that sense of seeing that was rooting in perception itself, is fundamentally beyond birth and death. The essence of perception, fundamentally beyond birth and death. So, and it says in the story, everyone was happy and enthusiastic when they heard that news. You're immortal. Are you happy and enthusiastic? So this essence of seeing. Now, the antennas we're working with, the actual physical sense organs, are in the realm of space-time. They've got to be, right? The antennas. The essence of seeing is not. Whoa. Whoa. Feast on that for a moment. So, how are we doing on time? Okay, we're about halfway through. Let me just pause for a moment. We've talked about guest and host. We've talked about going beyond life and death. If there's any question that you want to raise or ask or put in the chat, let me just invite that for a moment. If there's something stirring in you that you have to, before we go on. Are we good? So we're going to now go into if our senses essentially deceive us, why do we press the opening? It's not that they're deceiving us. In a way, it's that, and it's a great question. I love this. It's not that they're deceiving us. It's that we have to see through what they're presenting to see clearly. We have to see through what they're working from to see clearly. And it is through the senses that we can penetrate alaya vijnana. So alaya vijnana is the place where the senses are operating. So we can use the senses to break through it, to break it up. Another way to say this is that all this phenomena are appearances within this wonderful, bright, Bodhi, pure, profound mind. Why do we stray from seeing that clearly and then we see all the phenomena only? Why do we get caught when he says we we stray from the bright and subtle nature of enlightened mind and settle for delusion within enlightenment or ignorance within suchness. We miss it. And what a way to say it is that the consciousness that we're born with, even though it's an evolutionary product that has taken a long time to produce, it is still a simplifier. It simplifies things. And it evolved to keep us alive. So it evolved in ways that are related to the survival of the body, survival of the guest. So we are growing up through, you and I, as little kids, all the way up through what sits on the screen right now, have grown up through this working of consciousness, sensing this field, making all of our, this is good for me, this isn't good for me, this is okay, you know, not okay, discriminations. And we mistake all of this stuff, all of this, what they call disturbance, as the nature of mind. Whereas we're seeing all the waves, but we're missing the ocean. That's another way, that's another metaphor. Seeing the waves, missing the ocean. So our perception is normal, our ordinary perception is working off of a kind of resonance, or not a kind of, a resonance with the fields that were around, a resonance with alaya vijnana. And let me see if we can give an example of this. The way it's talked about in the text is the essence of seeing is originally clear, but it's like a second moon. The essence of perception is like a second moon. Remember, essence of perception is beyond like birth and death, but it's like a second moon. And perception is like a reflection of the moon in water. So the instruments that we're working with and the field that they're able to sense, the alaya, is like collapsing, the flattening what we're able to see. They're missing the brightness. That's why it's called dimness, or dim mind, dimness. They're missing they're flat landing it. So an example would be, let's use our cup again. Just pull up the cup. Put up your cup. Okay, I'm holding up my cup. I see it's, let me put it in front of me. Maybe it will. So what is the difference between the cup you're holding and the image of your cup on the screen? What's the difference? Well, this is in, the one I'm holding is in 3 dimensions, and the one on the screen is in 2 dimensions. How about yours? Same thing? You got it? Yeah, right. It's in 2 dimensions. Can you drink out of the cup you're holding? Yes. Can you drink out of the cup on the screen? No. So it's lost functionality, right? You know, in flattening it in a way, it's no longer the richness that it was originally, right? So this flattening is what we're working with in how we perceive with alaya vijnana. But it's even worse than this. This is like the second moon. Now I'm going to take my cell phone. I'm taking my cell phone. I'm going to see if this works. If you don't have to do this too, but here's my cup, and I don't think this is going to work. Okay, there you go. A reflection of the cup on my phone. Could you do that with yours? Can you get a reflection of your cup in your cell phone, like you were going to take a picture of it? A reflection of your screen cup in your phone. So now we're 2 stages removed from reality. Are you with me? And if you have a lousy lens in your camera, that's like having a diluted mind. It's like you're gonna, or having a screwed up mind. It's gonna distort the way the picture is taken. But even what it's working in is already a flatland version of bright, wonderful Bodhi. So what we are working with are like reflections of a flattened Bodhi. And as we improve our senses, we get a better image. It's like if you were looking at the moon and water. If the water's all disturbed, that moon is pretty disturbed, right? It's a really distorted image of the moon. Whereas if the moon is very calm, the water is very calm, the moon comes clear. So by training our senses and training ourselves, we get a better image. But we still haven't returned the flatland version to its fullness until we samadhi through. Are you with me? Yeah. So what breaks through that, the powerful samadhi, it is called the Surangama samadhi, hence the name of the sutra. What's the power of being able to see through, of breakthrough? So to go back, Kelly, to your question, in our training of the senses, we're clearing up the instrument. We're cleaning the instrument. We're making it a much better antenna. So it's going to get a much better reflection of the moon. And it's getting in a better, we're also training the breath and posture. And the senses, again, the senses are where the insight tends to come, because it doesn't tend to come from discriminating mind running around with another guest. Thought is a lousy way to try to enlighten. Senses much more reliable. Again, Surangama Sutra asks every bodhisattva under the sun about their paths to enlightenment. And they all talk about different ways. And for some, they actually do use thought. But it's not considered the best practice. It's not the most generalized practice. Works for some, but in general, not so effective. So all living beings, the sutra says, all living beings from beginningless time have disregarded their selves by clinging to external objects, guests, and missing their fundamental minds. Hence, they're turned round by those objects. If they can experience fundamental mind, they can turn objects around. They'll be like me, Buddha says, in a state of radiant perfection. The end of each of their hairs will contain all lands in the 10 directions. Past, present, future, north, south, east, west. Just feel that for a moment. So the beauty, the power of these flips, and this is really what inspired the Zen leader, this sutra, is it's really, to me, it's the essence of leadership. Are you going to be turned around by the world, or are you going to turn it around? Now, by turning things around doesn't mean you can do anything, because we still have to work with the laws of nature and karma and what's going on. Those things still, you have to pay attention. That's where good senses help, right? And if you're working with all things arising through you, it's a very different phenomena than if you're wrestling with external objects. Feel that for a moment. So let's see. Alaya Vijnana. a lot of the sutras about breaking it up, as I said, and it tries to break it up through perception. The three functions, there's three functions of alaya vijnana, three things it does, called self-evidencing, gives us a sense of self, something steady to look at when our senses aren't giving us anything interesting, but something that feels ever present, that gives us a sense of ever presence. So we don't experience our life as starting and stopping constantly, right? We have a sense of continuity. So self-evidencing, and then perception and form. Perception and form break apart as the subject-object resonance that comes out of alaya vijnana. So now we're going to break out self-evidencing, the self-evidencing function of alaya, the next part of the sutra. And Ananda and Buddha are talking again, and he says, show me the right and pure essence of perception. So again, we're trying to get to the bottom of things so we can be sure it's identical with external objects. And Ananda says, I can't dissect it out. The essence of seeing has no independent nature apart from phenomena. The essence of seeing doesn't exist apart from phenomena. And Buddha says, good. Whenever Buddha says good, you know he's on the right track, because otherwise you get no, 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 no. So you can't dissect out the essence of seeing from phenomena. They're all interwoven. So looking at all these objects, which is not seeing, and Nanda says all of them are the seeing, or else I wouldn't be able to see him. He says, good. Now everyone's getting confused. So this is when Manjusri, who represents wisdom, intercedes. So he says, seeing and its causes are essentially the bright, profound substance of absolute mind, enlightenment. So there's no is or is not in them. It's not, this is seeing, this is not seeing. And he uses himself as an example, just like with me, there's not me, and then there's a second me who first is and is not. With the absolute real moon, clear seeing, same with the absolute. The real moon, or I'll say the real cup versus the flattened cup, the second cup. Clear seeing and the seen are pure, bright, absolute bodhi, wrongly perceived as form and voidness, or antenna. The antenna of my perceptions, the antenna of my, I'll call it ego consciousness, resonating with the alaya vijnana. And it raises accompanying misconceptions of duality. So if you see from a singular point of view, it gives rise to all kinds of mental conditions, and you'll get stuck in its duality. If you see by means of true, bright, enlightened nature, you avoid the duality. So you illumine with great wisdom, not with conventional consciousness. So a distinction is being made between wisdom, which is non-dual, and consciousness, which is dual. The perception of form is consciousness. It's the phone taking an image of the flattened cup. Non-perception is wisdom. So I want you to feel into this. What it's getting at is that it again is why samadhi is so key here. It's how to see not from a fixed ego point of view, but to just see. To see from no fixed place, or sometimes it's the Rinzai terms are things like the true man of no rank, or it's in order to And yet the seventh consciousness, the ego consciousness, which is looking to alaya vijnana for constant reinforcement and using the thinking mind, discriminating consciousness, sixth consciousness, which is getting lots of input from the five senses, which are the first five. So let me just review that. The first five senses are what would have names, sight, hearing, taste, touch, right? Smell. So these are the basic five. And then the sixth consciousness is the thinking mind, the discriminating mind. Seventh consciousness is kind of the part, it's like the organ of the, we would now think of it as a part of the brain that creates a sense of ego. Eighth consciousness is what that seventh consciousness looks to make sure it still exists when it's not getting inputs from the first five. So there's this constant, that's in that part of that self-evidencing. All of this consciousnesses, eighth all the way on down, emerge out of the bright Bodhi ocean, out of absolute emptiness, if you will. And seeing from no fixed place means I'm not seeing through the eyeball of the seventh consciousness. I'm not seeing through the lens of I. And it means, in a way, I'm the whole picture, samadhi. Means in since all of this developed as a way to keep I alive, it means somehow this system has reconciled life and death. We have to know who we are beyond life and death. It means we have to see without care for our personal survival. That's why we say in our Zen training, we resolve the three great dualities of mind, body, self, other, life, death. When you resolve that duality, you aren't caught up in this isn't, this either orness. And I've been feeling into another image that's coming to mind as I speak to you on this, is that of the yin yang symbol. It's like out of absolute emptiness, a way to try to describe what comes into being is one thing doesn't just arrive. Everything arrives in pairs, or it arrives in relationship to something else, right? And containing that other, so it's all, you instantly are in the realm of relationship. A way it's said in the sutra is when the absolute emptiness becomes alaya, body and universe come into being. If you untangle the body from within and the world from without, alaya is essentially one true mind. So even all these things that are guests are one true mind. This is their phenomenal representation. But as we know, the phenomena and the absolute, they're always intertwined. They're always together. They're always intersected. They're always, one is not without the other. You can't find phenomena that doesn't have essence. You cannot find essence without phenomena. Always together. So, all seeing clearly. That was Green Roshi's theme of the year. So maybe it was a perfect year for Surangama Sutra. There's a great line in the sutra about seeing perceives seeing. Seeing is not seeing, for seeing strays from seeing, and seeing cannot reach it. It's like, what? But here's what I was getting at. When absolute seeing perceives the essence of alaya. Essence of seeing is alaya vijnana. Alaya differs from absolute. And your conventional false seeing can't get to the absolute that way. But when you just see with wisdom, with the eye of wisdom, with the Surangama Samadhi, with the eye of wisdom, all of this, including alaya vijnana, and your senses, and the self that gets evidence, all of it is held. All appearing within bright, wonderful, absolute Bodhi. not going, not returning, no birth, no death to be found. If you cling to phenomena, it's all up and down. If you rest in the whole, it's all arising within you. How do you want to live? How do you want to die? Right. Rest in this for a moment. So I'm conscious of the fact that we are coming near the end of time. So I am going to move us. There's a big chunk of the sutra. We'll go into it more in the reading group that is going to go through lots of different ways to try to get a handle on this through all the senses and returning them to their source and things like that. But I want to get to the question about how do we practice this? And one thing I'll mention before I get to practice, there's a part in the sutra that's talking about how all this phenomenal world comes about. And it just, the physicist in me was just kind of in awe of this understanding being available 2,500 years ago, way, way, way before, because it was only 100 years ago that we understood quantum physics. And what he's describing here to me is like so beautiful. But he talked about how differentiation comes about when the elements like earth, water, air, fire, he's not talking about the whole, periodic table of elements, but the basic elements, they mix and fuse, and new forms are wholly dependent on their interaction. Everything arises in resonance, in relationship, nothing exists on its own. So these are always in the realm of creation and destruction. But take a speck of earth and make it smaller. So if you pick up a little grain of sand or a little piece of rock, a grain of sand, and you have, this has silicon in it. Okay, silica, you break that apart, you go, break that out. Now you're down to the atoms and molecules. If you break that apart, what they say in the sutra, smaller and smaller, eventually you get to the void. So the whole thing comes out of the void. This is like the send it back meditation. A remarkable understanding for the times. What we'd say now in quantum physics is you get to a point where the particle is also a wave, and the thing that makes it particular is perception itself. In other words, out of the field of the wave function or the field of possibility, the process of perception particularizes reality. Whoa, perception isn't the passive thing we thought it was. No. It's, in physics, we'd say collapses the wave function to a this or a that. But what's so interesting is not only does it create particles, it creates the knower who sees the particles. That's the point where we missed. It created both of us. That's the part we missed. We thought we were just seeing the particle, like we were seeing objective reality, that it existed out there. But both body and the universe come into being in the same resonance. What a remarkable understanding for the time. But of course, this kind of understanding comes out of samadhi. And then we need lots of science and lots of development and lots of, like 2,400 years to get a way to approach it another way. But it's still the same intuitive understanding. So how do you realize this? There's two parts of the sutra I want to read that I'm just going to read the exact words out of this, because Buddha asks all the wise people in the room, what was your best practice? And they start sharing it. And they all have good methods of teaching for sure. But this one, I found myself reading so many times, and I found it so helpful. And for those of you who have the Charles Luke translation of the Surangama Sutra, it's on page 135. And I have this little page tabbed in my version. And I want to just read to you a paragraph, because it gets to the Bodhisattva of compassion, of Avalokitesvara, who rose from his seat. We call it the regarder of all cries of the universe, but this is a guy who really knows how to use hearing. He could hear all the cries of the universe, but listen to how he uses hearing in this example. He's going to answer how he could see, use the foster hearing and the fine sense of hearing to see absolute mind, to hear absolute mind, to realize absolute mind. So thereupon, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva rose from his seat. And you said, I developed the Bodhi mind, and for my entry into Samadhi, I was instructed by Buddha to practice meditation by means of the organ of hearing. So often as teachers, you look for what is the sense that's going to open someone up. And I guess Buddha saw this guy had a good ear, right? You could hear all the cries of the universe, had a good ear. At first, Avalokitesvara says, by directing the organ of hearing into the stream of meditation. So I invite you to just, as you're hearing these words, use your own organ of hearing to just enter the stream of meditation. He said this organ was detached from its object, and by wiping out the concept of both sound and stream entry, both disturbance and stillness became clearly non-existent. Thus, advancing step by step, both hearing and its object ceased completely. But I did not stop where they ended. When this awareness of this state and its state, when the awareness of this state and the state itself were realized as non-existent, both subject and object merged into the void, the awareness of which became all-embracing. With further elimination of the void and its object, both creation and annihilation vanished, giving way to the state of nirvana, which then manifested. Can you feel the send it backness? The send it backness. So I invite you to just sit for a moment and you're hearing my words. Have a feeling of sending it. Maybe there are sounds in the room where you are. Just feel the entire stream of sound that you're aware of right now. Feel it going back to its source. In its source, in its source. And again, clearly non-existent means if it's still moving, go back to where it comes from. So you're getting to something that does not move. Feel how these vibrations are arising out of something that inherently unmoving. So near the end, Manjusri offers a gatha, a summary, a poetic summary of the whole sutra. I was struck in its opening how it is its own Genesis story. I said this is a sutra that gets to the bottomless bottom. You just read the opening of this gatha. It's very beautiful. And then I'm going to jump to a place where we talk about this inverting hearing. Manjusri's gatha on the appropriate method for human beings. Perfect and clear by nature is the Bodhi ocean. Pure and faultless Bodhi is in essence wonderful. Its fundamental brightness shone, so by chance creating an object, which then obscured its radiant nature. Thus in delusion there appeared one-sided emptiness, flattened cup, in which an imaginary world was arbitrarily built. Steadying itself, the thinking process made the continents, while the illusory knower became a living being. Out of the Bodhi ocean arises dimness. The consciousness emerged from that. The senses that resonate with the consciousness. A universe and a body are born. And the Gatha goes on. To talk about the means of how to see through this. How to see through this. It goes through all the means of training and their inadequacies. Landing on sound and hearing is the best. And I feel that that's no accident. That's no accident. Of all the antenna we have, sound is the one that, for sound vibrations, really work with the physical body in a way that even light does not, or smell does not. You could tell when you shout into water that water moves, it vibrates. Water vibrates to the frequencies of sound, right? And we're mostly water. There's something about sound and how we're constructed that is very much that it moves us. That's why music is so emotional, right? Sound is very special that way. So Manjushri and this Gatha goes through all the ways for training and why they're good for some people. They can be expedient for some people, but for most people in general, he would say sound. To hear your very self, your true self, turn backwards that faculty employed to hear the Buddha's words. So to hear your very self, why not turn backwards that faculty employed to hear the Buddha's words? Hearing is not of itself, but owes its name to sound. Freed from sound by turning hearing backwards, what do you call that which is disengaged? When one sense organ has to its source returned, all six are thereby liberated. Seeing and hearing are like optical illusions, just as all three worlds resemble flowers in the sky. With hearing disengaged, the illusory organ vanishes. With objects eradicated, perfectly pure is Bodhi. In utter purity, the bright light pervades all. With its shining stillness enfolding the great void, all worldly things, when closely looked at, are but illusions seen in dreams. Like a clever showman presenting a puppet play. Though the movements are many, there is but one controller. When that control is stopped, the figures have no nature. Likewise are the six organs derived from one alaya, which divides into six unions. If one of these is returned to its source, its host, all six are ended. With infection ended, Bodhi is realized. With infection ended, Bodhi is realized. You see through the matrix. So I'm going to read one more version of this. This version is from the Zen leader. Maybe you've come across it here. This was a paraphrasing of Manjushri's Gatha. I'm going to give it to you as a recap one more time of the ways to practice. The ways of practice are many. Some work better than others, and some work better for certain people than others. But if you ask me what works best in general, I would have to say sound. For sound is ever present, and our sense of hearing is ever available to teach us, to hear your own nature. Invert that faculty used to hear even the wisest words. Flip your hearing around. Return all sounds to their source until the heard and hearing have nowhere to go. Where there is motion, look to what pulls the strings. When the puppeteer stops, the puppets have no nature. Likewise, when even one sense stops, the empty nature of all others is revealed, delusion vanishes, awakening remains. So, play it backwards. Return the moving parts to their unmoving substance. Rest in that has nowhere to go. Closes with blessed be coming generations, so that they have abiding faith in this easy expedient. this hack. Have abiding faith in this way. One of the things that the Sutra says in the opening is how this will be the first sutra lost or forgotten or ignored in the quote Dharma ending age, whenever the heck that is. And all I can be sure of is it won't be this generation. So let me close it with that, and offer if there are any questions you would like to ask, or we can end it here. What I'd offer to you is play with this send it back meditation. Our normal way of thinking is to chain forward, daisy chain forward. You hear a sound and that, one thing leads to another. Motorcycle, gas burning, loud, Sturgis. Saw it yesterday, map reading. You go through, right? What happens when you expose, this is like the Wizard of Oz story, pull back the screen, go backwards. Who's behind the screen? The puppeteer. Send that back, and that back, and that back. Until knower and known has nowhere to go. Creation, annihilation. Rest in this bigness. And then when you play it forward, all phenomena arise in you. Thank you for joining me in my favorite sutra.